My name is Bridget Barry and I coordinate Farming for Nature. Farming for Nature was set up to inspire and encourage farmers that farm or wish to farm more for nature. And one of the ways we do this is we find exemplary farmers each year that are doing great things alongside nature. And this Q&A is a great way to hear from those farmers and that you can get to ask your pressing questions on what they do for nature on their land. If you miss part of this Q&A or you know of anyone that would like to see it in due course, we will have it up on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. So feel free to share it with anyone. So I'll kickstart the evening by asking our guest speaker a few questions. And then if any of you have any questions, just feel free to write them into your chat box and I'll facilitate them as we go along. So on to tonight's session, I'm delighted to welcome our September ambassador, Nigel Gillis from County Wicklow. Nigel is a cereal and I suppose forestry farmer. But what's interesting is that he's moved from being a conventional farmer into being less intensive and also seeing the benefits of nature. So Nigel, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight.
No problem.
Nigel, we might just start with, can you describe your own journey into farming and onto this particular farm?
Okay, well, I'm second generation farmer. I farmed with my father for a lot of years, and then in 1996, Kate and I, that's Kate is my better half. We started farming 50 acres on our own in our own right, and we started with beef and tillage. Now we'd no sheds or anything. We were both working. I was a photographer in another life, and Kate was a teacher. And we started farming about 60 cattle, and we had also crops. Now, the crops were, we moved into crops later on completely away from the cattle, but that was more to do with lifestyle. And it was very conventional. Um, we, 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 we were following the prescriptive approach, particularly with the crops. We had no real rotations or it was mainly spring barley after spring barley with an odd bit of oats or something in between. But and it worked. In those days it worked, and when you're starting off it works. But by 2014, which is I don't know how many years later, we were all cereals, and seen that there was major changes environmentally on the farm going on the farm. Um, Especially the tillage ground that had been in tillage for a good few years was turning, it was dying basically. No birds follow the plough, I think was the first thing you notice. It got harder and harder to establish crops. The soil literally had collapsed and it was just dirt. Um, there was more and more inputs going in, and I was getting more and more uncomfortable with the whole thing, to be honest with you. I found that I just was unhappy with it. And around that time, I was hassling my then Teagasc advisor for was there no middle ground? Was there nowhere that rather than chasing this 5 ton crop of wheat all the time, this elusive 5 ton crop of wheat that we would make a lot of money with, was there no better way that was more environmentally friendly maybe? And I wasn't really finding any answers until ironically on in 2016 on a Teagasc farm walk, I met Stuart Fitzgerald from who introduced me to Base Ireland. And that was really the start of the journey. Because I met a group of people who maybe met my tribe in a way. Their motto is farmers educating farmers, and they're all outside the box thinkers. The huge variety of people, bit large farmers, small farmers, organic, non-organic, all with the sort of a view trying to protect our soils and yet make a living off them, if you know what I mean. But a real open-minded bunch. And I went to Groundswell the same year, which I met another group of people that were all thinking outside the box, shall we say. And I literally came back from Groundswell, and I was at a talk there on soils in Groundswell, and one of the things that came up was about insecticide. And some speaker, I can't even remember who it was, said to me that said to the group that For every target species you kill 1,700 other species,
Mm.
and most of them do no harm, and some of them even help. So I actually stopped using insecticide when I came back from groundswell. I said, right, it's not working anyway, to be honest, or not really working. So I decided something was going to change, and in 2017, that's a year later, I did a soils course with David Wallace, where he sort of blew my mind. A completely different way of thinking about a lot of things, and I started to learn about the soil. And I changed from a plow-based system to a direct drilling system. Didn't really know what I was doing, um, but I still knew I wanted to change.
Mm.
And then I joined the Danu group, which the Danu EIP group, and that group really gave me confidence to try stuff. My neighbours at this stage were starting to look over the walls, thinking I was gone nuts. And I remember I had a sort of a policy. I bought a large number of white stakes, and anytime something looked really dreadful on the farm, I'd stick a few white stakes around it, and they'd all think it was just an experiment. Um, I quite enjoy the experimental bit. But
Mm.
anyway, I attended a huge number of courses, not and mainly run through knots, but there's KFM, homeopathy, biochar, Johnson Su bioreactor, biodynamics. I mean, literally all sorts of, we call it, sometimes some people would call it off the wall stuff, but and I still go to Teagasc events as well. I enjoy the learning, but I've changed my whole farm around. And this, in fact, the video that's up is actually out of date, Bridget,
You're going at
because
such speed, we can't keep up with you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, out of date. I decided I'd gone so far with my inputs. I had reduced them so much that I decided to go organic this year.
Mm.
So all that stuff about the drill and all is now gone because I'm not direct drilling anymore because I can't.
Mm.
So it's just been it's a roller coaster in a way. My wife reckons my farm is every bit of it is an experiment. So we're learning and really enjoying it.
So, I mean, you got rid of the first things you did was you got rid of the insecticides. Where,
Mm.
like, what were the biggest kind of keystone changes that you made on your farm to where you are today?
Well, look, I'm going to say that a lot of nearly every farm in the country suffers from compaction, but actually the biggest compaction is often in our own heads because we need to get off. I just found that once I got off the prescriptive system, once I got out of that system and surrounded myself with people who were thinking differently, it's amazing. I changed the thing around. So what I did was I started direct drilling. Just that's it worked out for me and I was able to buy a cheap drill and I'm pretty good with a welder, so I was able to gunter it together and make it work. But I changed the whole input status of the farm. I cut down on as many chemicals as I could. Now I still was using nitrogen. I'm still using some herbicides were the ones I struggled with. I had cut by the end of last year, I'd cut out all fungicides, but my aim was to try and cut them all back and try and give nature a chance. I suppose one of the big things I did was cover crops, which I learned through Base Ireland. They're pretty expert at. There are experts in among them who really taught me a lot. Um, but cover crops to try and help increase the soil biology. Um, the that was the so the one of the things right, okay, the major changes. I've changed the entire way I establish crops in the sense that I had changed to direct drilling. I had used cover crops, very strong rotations. So whereas I was farming barley, 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 barley with no cover crops, I changed that completely. Um, then the second big thing is one of the biggest things I think any farmer could do with home saved seed, saving my own seed, which is epigenetically suited to my land. Now it has its problems, like there's a bit of work involved in it, but saves an awful lot of money. And then through Danu and Base, then I learned about biological dressings, and we biologically dress the seed and they that makes a huge difference to getting a crop established. They they work better.
Right.
Um, and then they're the two major things that I think any farmer can do actually.
Yeah.
Um, I I also stopped cutting hedges. Um, Trevor Harris can take a bit of a bow on that one because he just I was at a talk he did and he just said, lads, if you want to help nature, just stop cutting your hedges. It'll save you
Mm-hmm.
money anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did.
Brilliant. Yeah. So there's a few things we're going to come back to there, Nigel, but in terms of the financials of,
Mm.
you know, moving from conventional, like what was there much investment you had to do
Uh,
in order to move out of kind of the mainstream conventional farming? Like obviously
um,
your direct drill was one,
yeah,
but
no, not really, because I bought that direct drill, believe it or not, sight unseen in the UK. I saw it advertised. I bought it. It was very cheap. It was about 8,500 euro. And then I spent a couple of thousand on it, modifying it myself, and I modified it as I learned more about it. So that wasn't a huge investment. Um, Other than that. Not really. I had built up the bits and pieces, a lot of, bits and pieces of equipment before that. So I don't think there's a major like to go into people sort of think about the drill first. It's not about the drill actually. It's about the other stuff. It's about the cover crops. It's about the rotations. It's about trying get lime statuses right and doing a whole lot of the basics of stuff we all know actually as farmers. We don't, we know this stuff.
mm,
It doesn't have to be complicated.
mm,
It was more about getting off a prescription.
yeah. And so coming back to, so you're saying saving seeds now is one thing that you would
Mm.
recommend that farmers do. How did you start doing that? What does that look like? I mean, is it, if a farmer is not doing that now, what can they, where do
Well,
they start?
okay, it's very simple, really. I just picked the cleanest piece of say it was barley. I'd pick the cleanest bit out of the field that I could, and I would try I've been lucky pretty well every year, even last year. I got it dry enough without drying. I'd usually put it into a trailer. I literally bored a hole in the side of the trailer and put a pipe in and blow a bit. I bought a bouncy castle fan and blow a bit of air into it. And that's my drying for the
Okay.
seed. I bought a very old seed cleaner, which cost the grand total of 300 euro. Um, the, so I didn't, there was no big expense. By the way, just to say this straight away, if you are keeping your own seed, you must pay royalties on it. It's just
Okay.
to be aware of that. A lot of farmers, and particularly organic farmers, are not aware of that. You must pay the
To the
royalties.
original,
Yeah, the
to
PVDO, it's the Plant Development Office it's in Back Weston, I think, in Dublin anyway. So you have to pay a royalty per ton of every ton of seed you use. It's just something to like we need to keep saying it because the royalties are due.
even
Some
if
would
you're not
argue they
selling it on, it's just, just yours,
no,
but I
no.
suppose you're selling the product. Okay.
Well, you can't sell seed.
Yeah. Okay.
It's illegal for a farmer to barter, to sell, or to trade seed in any way. It's just one of these quirks. I don't agree with it, but that's the way it is. So just to be aware of that. But
Yeah. Interesting.
uh, yeah, and then I cleaned it very like my equipment is very basic. I clean it and then I dress it. And the dressing is done with a little auger and a hand sprayer. It's very simple.
So biological dressing,
Hmm
what is it? What's it look like on your farm? And
oh,
and why do it over chemical dressing?
we've done a lot of trial work through Danu, and a lot of base members are doing this. I'm far from the only ones, but uh, it makes sense. Um, the biological dressings are simple enough. The main one I would use is vermi. I have a little compost bin on the farm. It's you find in the internet anywhere to how to make one and do one, and I basically just take some of the compost out of that, along with seed wash, which is this was something that we can credit Dave Beecher with, who was part of the Danu project. Um, Seed wash, it's just soaking last year's seeds, last year's crop in a drop of water, and then using that, leaving it for 24 hours, and using that water to dress the current seed. It makes them full of you'd see it. It's full of life when you look at it. I don't know if anyone has seen the video on of the microscope videos on the video that was done. Um, then sorry, I'm trying to think now. Humic and I use a little bit of seaweed, although there's a bit of chatter, shall we say, that I'm probably not that I'm not mightn't be right with that. There's some people are saying seaweed can cause that there's hormones in it can cause a seeds not to germinate right. I've never had a problem, but maybe it's because I'm fermenting the seaweed. I don't know. I probably wouldn't recommend people would put that in. This isn't anyone who fancies trying it. Talk to some of the farmers who are doing it. It's pretty
Mm.
easy because you won't get you. It'll be from other farmers you learn this.
Yeah. So if people don't know, there's something called Base Ireland, which is biological
Mm.
agricultural Ireland. It's easy enough to find on the internet. And then your video is on the Farming for Nature YouTube channel, and it went up a few weeks ago, and it will show the difference between the chemically dressed seeds and then the biologically dressed seeds, and
Yeah,
how much more alive they are,
yeah.
and therefore more ready for action when they hit
Yeah,
soil.
yeah,
Um, so what's interesting now, like you were saying, we were saying at the beginning, you're going at great speed. You're moving into organics. You're kind of
yeah.
in, you're transitioning at the
First year,
moment.
yeah.
So what's changed on your farm in terms of that?
Um, Not a lot in the sense that I was always, I was low input. The big thing that's changed for me is back to ploughing, because we haven't really worked out, and we haven't really worked out how to terminate cover crops. Um, and without ploughing basically to give you a clean spread for organics. I've tried crimper rollers and I've tried rolling in the frost and I've tried a lot of things, but the weed just gets out of control. And I tried it when I still had the backup of a herbicide if case it went wrong. So I'm back ploughing, which is the biggest thing that's a little bit of a shock to my system, to be honest. I use more diesel sowing 16 acres of spring barley than I did sowing 85 acres of winter crops the summer, the autumn before. So that's the biggest change. Other than that, not a lot has changed. I'm doing a lot of brewing of my own fertilizers and brewing seaweed and brewing silica from horsetail. We started fermenting nettle last year, and I it seems to be a very good source of nitrogen and phosphorus. I think the older people, gardeners, know this for years. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel really here. It's just that we as farmers, I think, a little bit have forgotten about it,
Mm.
about these things. And I've just gone back a couple of steps to it. But not a lot has changed in terms of organic. Now this year, because all my product has to go into the conventional system, and not much has changed. There is a problem with I do see a problem down the road with the markets in that there isn't a mill to take organic feed, and I'm
Okay.
a stockless farm, so I have to try now and work out some way of marketing that feed, which is
Uh,
something that I'm not sure and I will probably end up having to store a certain amount of it as well.
So where do the organic kind of beef farmers get their feed? Do they import it, or like how come there's
Well,
no market?
there is a certain amount of farmer to farmer trading. And
Mm.
that's probably where most of it goes. The There's a lot of dairy feed imported, um, at very high prices, I might add. But it's not easy to get. I want to grow combi crops because combi crops grow the best in an organic system, and they're an extremely good feed. But I want to try there isn't a direct route to market. That's the
Mm.
problem. And we've trying to see can we get There is a trading hub and that, but it really is down to, having to find a customer and trying to make connections with them. So it'll
Interesting.
be a little bit tricky, and I may end up having to hold grain for, a few months, which
Mm.
I've never had to do before. I'm probably too old to be starting these things now, but anyway,
Give it a lash.
give it that.
So as you're moving across to organics, how does that work for you in terms of kind of the finances and because I think when I was speaking to you recently, you were saying, you were being paid for acres, and
Yeah.
now, as you move into organics, that kind of changes slightly. And
Yeah,
so what
yeah.
does it all look like in terms of agri-environment schemes?
Well, the two issues there would obviously the organic payments are attractive. They're a good base to start, but there's a bit of a disconnect between well, particularly acres, and the organic scheme. I've like well, maybe I'm wrong, but I just find it a bit odd where I've moved from what I would regard as up an environmental step, but yet, because I have to pull, I the sorry,
Measures.
the actions I had was to do direct drilling. Now, because I can't do that I'm going to have to pay back the money I got for the direct drilling for the previous 3 years, which
Mm,
seems mad, but the schemes are sort of made and they're rigid, and there's no that they can't move.
mm,
So it's just one of these things. But overall, look, I'm maybe getting more reliant on payments from outside. Like, we're totally dependent on them. But then this year, in the conventional world, I mean, the cereal farmers are going to make no money.
mm,
So I don't think I'm going to be any worse off than they are,
mm.
because
Okay.
I have the payments, the organic payments coming. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's kind of a plus on that side.
Yeah, but
And then,
that mightn't always be the case now.
yeah, yeah, of course. So just moving across to nature,
Mhm.
how has nature changed on your farm? What have you seen? What's kind of, do you feel it kind of getting incrementally better
Oh
or?
yeah. Yeah, the farm has transformed. Starting literally within a couple of years of starting, we'll call it the biological journey. I don't know what the correct title is, but the birds started coming back. We have all the apex predators now. We have the buzzards, the kestrels, the owls. I'm part of the Wicklow Owl Project, and we have an owl box in one part of the farms, actually two side by side, which is very interesting. And they were put up by the Wicklow Project, and we've had 10 owlets in the last 3 years,
Oh,
fledged out of them, and so that's to me, and to see these birds and to be part of it is great. I have stopped rodenticide as well. Now that's a hard one for farmers, as we all know. It's not easy to just drop, because rats and mice can take over very quickly, and especially on cereals with lots of grain around.
mm,
But so far, I've managed to avoid using rodenticides for the last, well, since I was at Groundswell that time. So I'm pretty, okay. I'm trapping and I'm doing all sorts of things, but I think if we could, I think there may even be new products now that mightn't affect the birds as much. But I think, look, none of these things work in isolation. It's like it's a complete. You have to do a whole load of things,
mm,
and most of them are relatively easy.
mm. Okay, so we'll just ask some questions that have come in from the crowd, and
Yeah,
then I can come back again. So if
yeah,
anyone's got any questions, feel free to write it in the chat box. So David White has asked, is becoming organic the only way to achieve a premium for nature-friendly crops in Ireland? What are the markets for middle ground crops?
yeah. That's my big problem. Yes, I think that she's dead right. The, there is a premium for organic, but there is no premium in any shape or form for I don't know what you want to call it, this biological or regenerative um space. And the thing is that um I made this point to a couple of ministers when they were on our farm. that the actual big changes that can be made countrywide in terms of Ireland Inc. are actually in that middle ground rather than in the organic section. I mean, before I went organic, we were, for example, using foliar fertilizers. We were melting our own urea, and by doing that, I was cutting my nitrogen in the year by almost 50%. Now, there's, I think, 30 to 40 lads in base doing this as well, and their reductions are between 25 and whatever. I was probably very high, but at least 25%. And if we could get the whole country to do that, that would knock 100,000 tons of nitrogen out of the system. And you can
Mm,
imagine the effect that would have on our rivers and on, the environment, full stop.
mm,
So I think the middle ground is that we I don't want to call it regenerative biological. It's a pity that we can't get some sort of that for nature friendly farming, because most of that's really what it is, that shouldn't be a premium paid. That we can't, it's a pity we can't get a premium paid, because I
mm.
think it would make a huge difference.
And like you say, it's kind of tricky for everyone to go maybe into the
Yeah.
organic zone.
Well, John Garrity said at a thing, farmers in the red can't look after the green.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's
that's
true. So the second part of this question is the government support in the way we have stewardship and SFI in the UK, but he has answered that saying he's now researched acres. Is there anything you want to add to that? Is there any other government support that you know of for middle ground crops?
um
Acres
well,
perhaps
the,
is
the the big one that I'm involved in now as well is the this water EIP. Now it's a short-term funding as far as I know. Because by the nature of being an EIP, and that's basically a payment for cover crops, and it's within certain river basins. And I've only just joined it this year, so I presuming it's going to work the way it seems to be. But the big thing about it that I liked, and the reason why I signed up for it, I was using the cover crops anyway. So basically it will pretty well pay for the seed, which is a big thing to me because seed is hugely expensive. But the big thing about it is that it's flexible. So you can decide literally at the time of sowing the cover crop whether you want to hold it for a winter or a summer cover crop. Do you know what I mean? In other words,
mm,
whether you want to hold it right over the winter or whether you're putting in a winter crop into that field. It's completely flexible. If you don't put in the covers, you just pull out of it. There's no penalties, there's no for changing. And that's the way that it's the flexibility that I like. And that's what's missing, I think, in an awful lot of the schemes is
mm,
flexibility. Because
yeah.
we just have to play the ball as nature hits us with it.
Yeah, one size doesn't fit all in terms of
No.
farming systems, land types, but then also what weather turns up what
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
kind of can challenge in different ways.
Yeah.
Will Gabbett has asked for someone getting into regenerative agriculture, where would they start? What are the easy wins to start on?
Um, I suppose, like, okay, it's basic stuff. You need to start with it with a soil sample or two that you know roughly what you've got to start with. If we're talking about cereal farmers, which is what I would probably know most about, um, cover crops, they're just, and I would say, um, join Base Ireland. Start, thinking outside the box yourself. Learn maybe a soils course to try and learn, some things about the wonders of biology that are going on there. Um, that that would be the first start. Then I would look at things like, and I'm presuming the person is already in the conventional system. Maybe if you're already in the conventional system and you're heavily invested into it, and like it's difficult to change, maybe pick a small area, a field, couple of tram lines, whatever piece of ground you like, and try something different on it. Just, you know, maybe something mad, but try something completely different on it and see what happens. Because when you go out and buy a spade, bring a spade out, and every time you go for a walk, bring a spade, because and just see how that piece that you handle differently. It doesn't have to. If it doesn't work, it doesn't break you.
Mm.
It might look a bit untidy or whatever, but just try something different in it.
because I know you also, I mean, you've kind of got fields of multi-species swords, and you would
Yeah.
say, you've definitely seen the root differences definitely help your soil. Do you want to just tell us a bit about that for people who are kind of considering multi-species swords and
Well,
where
yeah,
to
it's not.
start or what to
Yeah, well,
consider?
it's not actually multi-species swords I have because that would be more a grassland farmer. It's just multi species cover crops I use.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, look, maybe I'm a little bit lazy and I not I sometimes think I'm a bit slow at times, but I struggled in the beginning to see there's all sorts of things that we call it rules in inverted commas that some of the speakers put in that you should use a warm series grass and a cool series grass, and that the cover crop should be specialist, and there is sense to, for example, making sure you don't have brassicas in front of oilseed rape and things like that. We call it, this is good agronomy. But I don't have oilseed rape in my rotation, so I use just as many species in a cover crop as I can afford to put in. So what I do is I mix up literally eight, could be 10 way species of cover crop. And I'll start with that. So after my winter crops, that will be going in the earliest. And then as the year goes on, I will cheapen it by adding in using that mix, but stretching it or adding it with maybe mustards and stuff that are cheaper. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Because they're very expensive. I spend a lot more money on cover crops than I do on my cash crops,
Mhm.
cover crop seed.
Mhm.
They have an incredible effect on the ground. I don't think people, and they tend to look at it. I was on a farm walk the other day and we were looking at a very, very small cover crop. It was only about that height, but nobody was looking underground. And when we started to look underground, we could see that the root system, even though the cover crop was very small, it was late sown, it was actually keeping the soil alive because when I went and got a shovelful from a drill miss, it was like cement. It had collapsed. So it
Mhm.
just, cover crops are working all the time. Expensive to put in, yes, but there are a lot of schemes now that are helpful to that.
Mhm.
So, so
And do you think your yield is, your cash crop yield is better? Like, can you quantify it in terms of
no,
how much it
very
costs you?
no, it's very difficult to quantify. That's the only problem, and
Yeah.
it changes from year to year. And sometimes you get the benefit not in the year you do the thing, you
Mm.
get it in a year later. Unfortunately, anything to do with biological farming, it doesn't follow straight lines, and that's why it's very difficult. It tends to, you get benefits. You mightn't see a benefit for a year or 2 years. It's quite
Right.
difficult. I
Mm.
think I think as for somebody starting off, go talk to people who are doing it. Walk on their farms. On your own farm, get down off your tractor and get a shovel, a spade,
Mm.
and walk around it. Most farmers are very intuitive of their own land. If they just stop for a few minutes and just walk into it. I mean, I was with a farmer today. Actually, he was into one of my winter covers, which has ironically almost gone too far ahead because the weather was so good. But we walked into it and he just looked at me and said, this would do you good to be here. It was alive with bees and butterflies. And he's a heavy conventional farmer, but he just,
Mm.
it just to walk out there into it.
Mm.
So sometimes you can't quantify that,
Mm.
but, it's definitely positive.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's alive. So Will Gabbitt has also asked, how have you felt about moving back to plough-based system, having been reduced and no-till?
Yeah, that's the part I'm struggling with at the moment, in the sense in my head. Look, it's a balance. I suppose I can't see how no-till will work without the herbicides,
Mm.
and maybe I was getting more uncomfortable. I just said, look, I'm going to give this a go. I'm not 100% convinced. It is a major hit. I could go out and sow 40 acres there with the direct drill without any hassle. No, it was relatively easy to do. Whereas now I have to wait for a contractor to come, he's to plow it, and then I have to more than likely roll it, and then and maybe if there's a lot of cover crop before the plow, I'm going to have to mulch it, and there's
Mm.
a lot of it quadruples the work in terms of doing it. But I suppose the downside is I don't have Roundup. I don't have to use Roundup. So,
Yeah, yeah. The upside,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah. And
I think I actually think that, that middle ground would probably make a bigger difference to the country,
mm,
nationally than necessarily the organic. I'm not purist about it at all.
yeah, yeah, just kind of getting that message out as well would be important.
Mm.
So Katie Crossan has asked, what sort of yield reduction might you expect switching from conventional to more biological methods?
Okay, now, if she's talking about still in conventional, yeah, my yields were generally down by about half a ton on my neighbours, but my margin was way better
Mm,
because I was spending so little. Like if you take it, firstly, I wasn't ploughing, I was direct drilling, which was a quarter of the cost of doing a plough till. So I was then saving my own seed. And like if you take this here, to hold a couple of ton of your own product will cost about less than 200 euro. And if you buy seed, I'm talking about in the conventional world, you're talking about 750.
mm,
Like that's a huge difference. Now, if you go to organics, it's even worse because it could be 1,400 euro, depending on what variety you're buying.
mm,
So straight away, I was into a huge advantage in the establishment in terms of cost. And then I used no fungicides during the year. I made my own lab and I made my own ferments and I was using them instead. I use no insecticide. Well, insecticide is cheap, which is probably the biggest problem there is. But overall, my input costs and my machinery costs were low. So even though I was a half a ton less than my neighbor who is full metal jacket, um, I was way better off
yeah. And then moving from that to
to
organic,
organics.
you haven't quite seen the benefits yet because you're in year
No,
one. Yeah,
no.
exactly. So,
I'm not 100% convinced that I will.
yeah.
It depends on market. It is totally dependent on market, whether I can sell my product, and I've never been in a situation where I couldn't just go straight off the combine and tip it in the local merchants.
Mm,
It's one thing that's really badly, in one sense, it reminds me a little bit of miscanthus. I don't know if you remember elephant grass,
mm.
where farmers were encouraged to grow it and they were grant aided to setting up the thing, but nobody did any work on the product. And the last of
Getting,
mine ended up being exported 11 tons of time on a lorry to the middle of England. I mean, it was
wow.
just nuts because it wouldn't
Mm,
burn in Ireland. I mean, it
mm.
was crazy stuff. And I'd just be a little concerned that organics, there was a big push to get farmers in, and I jumped, but I'm not convinced that there's enough thought put to the marketing.
Interesting.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe I hope I'll still be at it in 5 years' time.
You're in for the long haul.
Yeah.
So let's get back to you've got quite a lot of your farms to forestry as well. We haven't mentioned that at all. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah.
What do you do with it? What's it,
No,
how
it's
do you
all
manage
well.
it?
No, well, to be honest, I haven't managed it at all because it was only sown. It's probably parts of it are probably will be ready for thinning. It wasn't conventional. It was put in I'm going to say shortly after we started, after Kate and I started. So it's it'll be ready. Some of it will be ready for thinning in probably a couple of years. It was done as Scots pine, the majority of Scots pine with birch put through it. But unfortunately, a lot of the Scots pine, there was a problem with the stock, and a lot of it wind blew, and it was about 10 years old, and we had to replace it with Norway. So as a commercial forest, it's not going to make sense, but I'm hoping we'll be able to make something nice out of it, and we'll get our bit of firewood, and it's not a mature woodland, shall we say. It was
Mm,
it's a forest we put in. We would have a lot of We have quite a few double ditches. The original, it was an estate 100 years ago, and of course the gentry used to have these double ditches that they could ride their horses down along. They were big banks with trees on both sides, but a gap in the
Okay.
middle, and they could ride the horses down along. And we've quite a few of those. We're trying to protect them.
Mm,
They have a lot of mature trees on it. Unfortunately, we've lost a huge amount of timber to a dieback, and
mm,
I'm not seeing any ash surviving at the moment. We've had to take
okay.
down quite a lot along the roads, and I'll have more to take down this year.
Yeah, it's gutting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, have you have you made any other changes to your farm for nature? Like,
Yeah,
or
well, the big ones would be I've stopped cutting hedges pretty well. I
mm,
only cut the road. I cut the roads because for two reasons. One is the safety of my neighbors around and myself driving around them. I cut them. Also, I'm happy enough to stop the birds nesting in the road hedges because I'd rather they went inside where they wouldn't get killed. Um,
mm,
but well, I've also left a lot of margins. I've kept I stopped when was direct drilling. I stopped going in close to the ditch because there wasn't really any point.
mm,
And I also felt that a margin along the edge of the field. It's a little bit of space for nature. It doesn't cost me a whole lot, and I would have a lot of those left, a lot of those margins left. And actually, the Wicklow Owl Group were claiming that one of the reasons why our boxes are doing so well is because a long, there's a 30-acre field with three long ditches with 3 to 4 meters wide all along them. And
mm.
they say that that's where they hunt at
Yeah,
night.
good corridor. Yeah.
Good corridor, yeah, and
Mm.
so they're the main things. I suppose I'm trying to think what else. The rodenticide is gone. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, my brain is gone.
No, no, not at all, not at all. So just coming back to some questions here, David White has said we clearly need to get the regulated supply chain and consumers to support the middle ground. Luckily, we have wild farmed doing that on the UK mainland. Do you know anything
We
about
ha
wild
we
farm, Nigel? No.
What's it
Do
called?
you what a wild farm, wild farmed?
No,
Um,
I'm not familiar with it.
yeah, I've come across it, but do you have a carbon market yet? Was
No.
a question. No.
No, no, and I'm not 100 from the Danu project. Um, Carbon in the soil goes up and down, and I
Mm,
think I'm personally, I know there's a lot of people believe that this is the holy grail. I'm not convinced that this carbon market thing will work. And the interesting thing is all my forestry, for any forestry I have, I don't own the carbon credits on that. The government do. Anything that was
mm.
put in with a premium, as far as I know, I don't own them. Um, so I'm not terribly sure that that'll ever materialize. But look, maybe it will. We're certainly not being paid for it at the moment, anyway.
Yeah. Both of our brains aren't working tonight because Wild Farmed is actually Andy Cato. It's a group of farms in the UK, and the guy was in Grufa. Anyway, he was a DJ. I think he was at what you call it, Groundswell
Grant.
this year as well.
Yeah, I wasn't
So,
there this year, so.
but anyway, so Katie Cross on his ass. If organics isn't working for you and you opt out, is there a penalty that you must pay back, deferred payments?
Oh yeah, well, you're in it for 5 years, and if you don't stay in it, you have to pay back. I'm not. No, sorry, I don't mean to sound negative about organics because I'm not. And
Yeah,
I wouldn't be.
you're
I
just
wouldn't be.
questioning the market. You're looking
Yeah, I'm
to
just
hope that
concerned. Yeah, and oh
yeah,
no, I plan to stay. I mean, there's no point going into organics if you're not planning to stay. But I'm just, maybe I suppose because I was coming from where I was coming from, a low input system that if you're coming from conventional system, you'd see a huge drop in your inputs. I'm not seeing that massive drop, but
mm,
there's a few issues, and mainly to do with market. If we could sort the market out, I think we'd be away. But it is niche at the moment, and we'll see. We'll see. I'm
yeah.
enjoying it anyway.
Good, good. Nida Brown has asked, is there any testing for minerals to compare conventionally grown grain versus biologically grown grain?
No, I think that would be a great thing. I don't know of any. Now, Ned might know more than I do, but those are the things that really, this nutrient density business. a few years ago, I was at a seminar and they were talking about this instrument that would be available to all um, shoppers, that they'd be able to point their phone at food and it
Mm.
would zap at them and tell them what the nutrient density would be, and that all this suddenly this middle ground would have a natural market. But it seems to have died a death. I haven't seen any of the instruments anyway.
Yeah, refractometer. Yeah, it hasn't
Yeah,
quite hit
no,
the
it's not.
market.
No, this was even
Yeah.
more like we use a refractometer all the time in
Okay.
at least I, use it quite a lot. No, this was an instrument that the shopper in a shop could use. It was connected to their phone and they just
Mm.
literally pointed at an apple, two apples, and it would tell them which was the most nutrient dense.
Mm.
But I haven't seen that coming. So no, at the moment, I think it would be worth trying to get some sort of I don't know. Maybe if like if you look through the carbon of the farm, maybe that's one way of doing it. I just don't know if you could. I'm talking about the middle ground now. Organics has its own certificate and its own, certifying body, so it stands on its own. It's the middle ground that doesn't really have you know, a any sort, like you'd imagine that the companies would like to see regeneratively grown, and I'm a bit reluctant to use that word because I know it's been abused and greenwashed in all over the
Mm.
place. But you know what I mean, that middle ground that are cutting down on their inputs maybe don't have, this huge stocking rate of cattle. Maybe they're, milking cows and they don't have, they're doing more for nature, like the farming for nature ambassadors that were there, that they should be getting something extra for their product.
Mm.
Um, but unfortunately, I don't think it's happening.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, things like refarm and stuff will start to build up
Well,
momentum.
yeah, hopefully.
So where would you start advising another farmer if they want to explore organic tillage? What's the main things to consider moving into organics apart from filling out the forms? Um,
Um, I think we're back to the same thing again. It depends where they're coming from. If they're coming from, but if they're coming from a very conventional mindset and, have literally, not been digging holes on their farm to see what soils can, just to look at their soils, I suppose, um, it's going to be a shock for them because suddenly you go out into your field and nobody has given you a prescription of what to do. You don't have to, we'd gone a bit. I certainly had gone a bit lazy as a farmer before I changed my system. In that I would get the merchant would give me this list of things that I needed to put on, and I didn't have to think about it. I could just say, all right, next Wednesday, fine weather, we go and we put this out, and I wasn't really thinking about it. And I suppose that's the biggest thing. You're suddenly on your own. No, you're not on your own. There's lots of people and there's lots of help out there. But it's not the same as the conventional system where, there's a big machine. It's like a big machine that's running. And in fairness, it's built up
mm,
over a long time. I'm not criticizing it as such, but if you step off that and you decide to go organic, um, you're down to really talking to other farmers and getting to know your land again. Most
mm,
farmers know this. They know their own lands, and when they get out with a spade, they remember it. Do you know?
mm.
It's just a matter of actually trying to
Take ownership of it again.
take ownership. That's yeah. You see, you're better able to express it than I am.
No, so, but and is there any one memory that stands out for you in particular that made you kind of think, I have taken ownership of this, like this, I'm proud of what I'm seeing right here,
Well,
right now.
I think the owls are a huge thing. I mean, the first time we had three owlets in the box, and the guys were there, and they were all excited, and they said, "Look, this is because of they suddenly have, we put up the box, we created the environment for them."
Mm,
That's definitely a wow moment. I I suppose when we've had a few farm walks, and I suppose when people sort of not so much the farming community, but the non-farming community instantly see the value of it. If you bring
mm,
any of the non-farming community out into a field, a cover crop field or something like that, they get it straight away. it's the farmers themselves who, and like it's not easy earning your living as a farmer.
Mm,
So, I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying it's a fantastic feeling when you get these people out and they see something it's doing a whole lot of things at the same time. None of them are magic.
mm,
And quite frankly, the weather, you think like the Danu project in one sense was extremely, it was invigorating in one sense and frustrating in another, in the sense that we did 5 years. And the amazing thing was we all changed our systems. We all went for more biological systems. But when the soil samples all came back at the end, we weren't really doing a whole lot better according to the samples and
okay.
the tests. Now, you could argue the tests are wrong, but
Was
it's
it
not.
above ground you saw better, or you know what?
Oh, there's huge. No, well, yeah, the cover crops are miraculous below ground. They
Yeah,
really are.
okay.
They just transform your soil. Now, it takes a good few years, and the weather knocks you back.
Mm,
You get bad years, wet years. Um, you know, you think you're winning, and the next thing, the weather hits you in the teeth, and you're
mm.
back starting again. Um, I'm trying to think what wow moment. I don't know. It's the whole thing. I'm just enjoying farming again.
Okay, that's a good enough statement. I mean, do you see a massive change to, where you were living, or where you were working
Yeah.
15 years ago to now? Yeah,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's mainly to do with, and maybe I'm gone more conscious of it, but the bird life is back in a big way. The insects are back. Um, nature's really resilient. It's amazing the way it picks up. I think I think Trevor Harris was actually right. Stop cutting the hedges and an awful lot of things happen.
Mm,
It just, yeah, we spent, this was an incredible year for blackberries. I mean, just
yeah.
to walk down and pick blackberries, and there were thousands of them, thousands,
Mm,
more than we could eat. Plenty
yeah,
left for the birds.
yeah.
Um, we're just, I suppose, I'm really conscious. For example, um, okay, the hedge cutting season opened a few weeks back. Why not just delay it a little bit? There's
Mm,
loads of berries and stuff for the birds. Just delay it a little bit. It doesn't have to be done immediately when the season opens. This sort of thing. That's the one thing I'm a little bit. I struggle now when I see hedges, cut to demolished.
mm.
I'm finding that upsetting.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I'm sorry, I'm rambling now, aren't I?
No, no, you're doing very well. And as Dr. Nishko says here, very impressive, Nigel. Fair play for taking the risk to experiment. More farmers should follow. Nigel, I think we're coming to the end of our journey. So thanks very
Yeah.
much for sharing your story. It's really impressive, how fast you're changing and going on to the next stage all the time and analyzing it all the way and exploring it. And like you say, leaving space for nature and the barn owls and the hedgerows and stuff. So thanks for doing that on behalf of all of us. Um, but it was just really interesting to hear tonight your story. So thanks for taking the time to do that. So if anyone wants to see to see Nigel's video, it's on our YouTube channel. And we also, towards the end of next month, we'll be having the Winterage weekend down in County Clare. And I think Nigel will be joining us down there as well. So we'll have a stall at the Winterage weekend. So look up burnwinterage.ie and come and join us. We have different walks and different things going on in the Burn for the bank holiday weekend in October. And Farming for Nature will be having their annual Farming for Nature gathering and awards that weekend as well. So we'd love to see as many of you there as possible. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. And our next webinar next month is actually a set of 4 webinars called the Winterage webinar series. So that's the week leading up to the bank holiday weekend. So I'll be sending out the links for that for anyone who has signed up for further notifications. You're free to go. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks to everyone for joining us. And we'll see you hopefully all again soon. Take care. Have a good evening.